Chapter 1: The Shattered Reflection. Elara had always known there was something different about the mirrors in her village. They were not simply reflective surfaces, as the elders warned, but gateways to something far more complex and dangerous. Yet she had never dared to test the limits of her curiosity until today. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of her small room, casting fractured beams across the worn wooden floor. She approached the mirror in the village square, an ancient relic framed in weathered silver, its surface dulled by time yet still holding a strange allure. Elara wiped the glass carefully, her fingers tracing the delicate patterns etched into the frame. Her sharp eyes caught the faintest glimmer, as if the mirror breathed with a life of its own. A sudden ripple disturbed the surface, like water disturbed by a stone. Elara stumbled back, heart pounding, as the glass shimmered and began to warp. Shapes twisted and contorted within, fragments of a reality that was familiar yet distorted. The air around the mirror hummed with a strange energy, making the hairs on her arms stand on end. "Elara!" a voice called sharply. Joran appeared beside her, his broad shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the flickering mirror. "Step back," he urged, though his voice held more awe than fear. Together they watched as the mirror's surface fractured further, revealing glimpses of shadowy landscapes where colors bled and forms shifted unnaturally. Elara's breath caught when a figure materialized within the glass, pale, regal, with eyes like black mirrors that seemed to pierce her very soul. She knew, without knowing how, that this was no ordinary reflection. It was the Mirror Queen, the dark version of herself who ruled the other side of the fractured realms. The villagers gathered hesitantly, whispers of fear and superstition spreading like wildfire. Elara felt the weight of their stares, the silent accusation that her gift was a curse. But beneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited within her. That evening, beneath the sprawling branches of the ancient oak that had witnessed generations of secrets, Elara sat with Tess and Joran. The healer's gentle hands clasped hers, grounding her in the midst of the storm. "You have a rare gift," Tess said softly, "but it carries a heavy burden. The mirror realms are not places for the faint of heart." Elara nodded, her mind racing. "I have to cross through, to confront her, to stop her before she breaks the balance completely." Joran's gaze was steady, unwavering. "We'll help you, whatever it takes." As twilight deepened into night, the village seemed to hold its breath. Elara's reflection shimmered once more in the mirror's depths, a fractured self waiting beyond the glass. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but she was ready to face the shadows of her own soul. With a final glance at the mirror, Elara whispered, "I won't run, not anymore." And with that, the first step into the unknown was taken, into a world where reflections betrayed and truths fractured, where the line between light and darkness blurred. The journey of the mirror binder had begun. Chapter 2: Through the Glass. The morning light crept cautiously through the narrow slits of the wooden shutters in Joran's cluttered workshop, casting long, fractured shadows across shelves crowded with glass shards, twisted metal, and delicate mirror-bound artifacts. Elara stood before the largest mirror in the room, a tall, cracked pane framed by ancient runes that pulsed faintly with silvery light. Her breath hitched as she reached out, fingers trembling toward the rippling surface. The glass shimmered unnaturally beneath her touch, distorting her reflection into a fractured mosaic of images that shifted and morphed with every blink. There, in that warped visage, she glimpsed 100 possibilities of herself, some brave, some broken, some terrifying. "Are you ready?" Joran's voice broke the silence, steady and calm. He stood behind her, his broad shoulders relaxed, but his eyes sharp with concern. In his hands he held a small pouch filled with artifacts, tiny charms of silver and glass, each humming softly with mirror-binding magic. "These will help keep you anchored. The realms you're about to enter aren't like ours. They twist and turn with every thought and whisper. You'll need every advantage you can get." Elara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I have to. The Mirror Queen's shadow grows stronger. If I don't cross soon, the balance will shatter completely." Joran offered a faint, reassuring smile. "Then let's make sure you come back whole." With practiced hands, he fastened the charms around Elara's neck and wrists. Each piece felt cold, yet alive, a tangible promise of protection against the fractured realities she was about to face. The weight of them grounded her, though the flickering images in the mirror still made her stomach twist with unease. Taking a deep breath, Elara stepped forward. The moment her hand touched the glass, a ripple surged outward, like the surface of a disturbed pond. Light fractured into shards, scattering across the room in prismatic bursts. The mirror grew liquid beneath her palm, and without warning, the edges of the world blurred and dissolved. Suddenly, she was no longer in the warmth of Joran's workshop. Instead, she found herself standing in a place both familiar and alien. The village she knew so well stretched before her, but the buildings bent unnaturally, their windows reflecting impossible angles, streets twisted like ribbons, colors bleeding into one another as though the world were a living painting, constantly shifting beneath her feet. Voices echoed faintly from the distorted figures that flickered at the edges of her vision. Ghostly versions of her neighbors, their faces blurred and shifting like reflections in disturbed water. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something metallic, sharp and unsettling. Elara's heart pounded, but she forced herself to move forward, eyes scanning the surreal landscape for any sign of danger. The artifacts Joran had given her pulsed softly against her skin, their steady glow a beacon of reassurance amid the chaos. "Remember," Joran's voice echoed faintly from the other side, as if carried on the wind. "Trust the charms and your instincts. The mirror realms will try to deceive you, but your heart knows the truth." A sudden shimmer caught her eye. Turning, Elara glimpsed a shifting figure in a pool of fractured glass nearby. As she watched, the reflection coalesced into a shimmering woman whose form flickered constantly, never quite solid. "Mira." "Elara." The seer's voice rippled through the air like a whispered song laced with ancient wisdom and warning. "The path you walk is fraught with shadows. Each step fractures your soul further, but only by embracing the broken can you become whole. Beware the Mirror Queen's grasp. She is both your enemy and your fate." The vision dissolved as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Elara alone once more in the disjointed village-scape. She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of Mira's cryptic message settle deep within her. Determined, she pressed onward, navigating the warped streets and distorted echoes of her home. Every reflection seemed to whisper secrets, every shadow a threat.
Yet with each step, she felt a growing resolve, a fragile hope that she could master this fractured reality, confront the darkness within, and restore balance. As the sun dipped lower, casting elongated fractures of light across the glassy ground, Elara paused to catch her breath. The journey ahead was uncertain, the dangers manifold, but for the first time she truly stepped beyond fear. The Mirror Realm awaited, and so did the Mirror Queen.
Chapter 3: Echoes of Truth. Elara's breath hitched as she stepped through the shimmering portal, the familiar surroundings of her village warping into an unsettling vision. The houses, once sturdy and grounded, now flickered and bent as if reflected through a funhouse mirror. The cobblestones beneath her feet rippled like liquid glass, and the air hummed with a strange, discordant melody that set her nerves on edge. She moved cautiously, her sharp eyes scanning the warped landscape. Faces she recognized emerged from the shadows, neighbors, friends, even strangers she had seen in passing, but their features were twisted, their expressions oscillating between warmth and cold detachment. Voices echoed around her, layered in strange harmonies that made it difficult to discern truth from illusion. Every familiar smile felt hollow, every glance shadowed by something unspoken and ominous. A figure approached, and Elara's heart skipped. It was Joran, or a version of him. His broad shoulders and steady gaze were there, but something was wrong. His eyes, usually steady and reassuring, flickered with suspicion, and his voice carried a hardened edge. "Elara," he said slowly, "you don't belong here. This realm twists everything. You should turn back." Elara shook her head, fighting the urge to retreat. "I have to understand it, Joran. If I don't, this fractured world will consume us all." He looked away, his expression conflicted. "Just be careful. The Mirror Queen's shadow stretches further than you know." The warning sent a chill down her spine. These distorted reflections weren't just illusions, they were fragments of truth, distorted by fear and darkness. Elara realized that each mirror realm revealed a different facet of reality, exposing the vulnerabilities and strengths of those she cared about. As she wandered deeper, Elara's gaze fell upon a shattered mirror lying on the ground. Its broken shards scattered light in fractured patterns, each fragment reflecting a piece of herself. She knelt, tracing a finger over the jagged edges, feeling the weight of her fractured identity pressing down on her soul. The mirror was a symbol of the broken reality she faced and the internal conflict that threatened to unravel her. A sudden ripple of cold air brushed her neck, and a haunting laughter echoed through the twisted streets. The chilling sound belonged to the Mirror Queen, a reminder of the dark reflection that awaited her on the other side. Despite the dread curling in her chest, Elara felt a surge of determination. She could not let fear paralyze her. She had to embrace the fractured truths within to confront the looming darkness. Slowly, she arose, her resolve hardening like tempered glass. Each distorted reflection, each unsettling encounter was a step toward understanding the fractured realities, and ultimately, herself. The journey ahead was fraught with peril and uncertainty, but Elara knew she must face it, for the balance of all worlds depended on her courage and compassion. As the echoes of the Mirror Queen's laughter faded into the distance, Elara took a deep breath and pressed forward, ready to unravel the tangled threads of truth and illusion that bound her fate. Her eyes, sharp and reflective, caught a glimmer of hope amidst the shadows, a fragile promise that even in fractured glass, light could be found. And with that, Elara stepped deeper into the fractured mirror world, where every reflection held a truth waiting to be faced.
Chapter 4: Secrets Beneath the Surface. The moment Elara crossed the threshold of the fractured mirror, the air around her shifted.
Gone were the distorted echoes of her village and the warped reflections of familiar faces. Instead, she found herself enveloped by a vast, cavernous space that stretched beyond sight. The walls shimmered like liquid glass, translucent and yet impossibly solid, reflecting countless shards of light that danced and flickered in rhythmic pulses. It was a library unlike any she had ever imagined, an ancient archive suspended between realities, where knowledge was preserved not in paper alone, but in the very essence of the mirror realms themselves. Her footsteps, muted against the smooth floor, echoed faintly as she moved deeper into the labyrinth of glass shelves. Each tome seemed to hum softly, resonating with a quiet energy that pulsed beneath her skin. The air smelled faintly of ozone and old magic, a scent that stirred something deep within her, a blend of excitement and foreboding. As Elara reached out to touch the spine of a particularly ancient volume, the glass shelf rippled beneath her fingers, and the cover shimmered into focus. The glyphs etched upon it were unlike any she had ever seen, delicate and complex, glowing faintly with a silver light. She carefully opened the book, revealing pages inscribed with elegant symbols and diagrams that seemed to shift and reconfigure before her eyes. The writing spoke of the earliest mirror binders, guardians who once wove the realms together in harmony. They had understood the delicate balance between reflection and reality, wielding their magic to maintain the veil that separated the worlds. But over time, the realms fractured, cracks spreading like spiderwebs across the fabric of existence. The texts hinted at a tragic betrayal that shattered the unity, plunging the mirror realms into chaos and distortion. Lost in the ancient knowledge, Elara barely noticed the soft sound of movement behind her until a ripple in a nearby mirror caught her eye. The surface shimmered and warped, and from it emerged a figure, Mira. She was as ethereal as the tales had described, a shifting, shimmering reflection that defied firm shape. Her voice was a whisper, yet carried through the vast chamber with clarity, full of weight and meaning. "Balance is more fragile than you know, Elara," Mira intoned, her form flickering like a flame caught in a breeze. "The fractured realms are not merely broken, they are bleeding. Each mirror is a wound, and each reflection a scar. You must hold these shards together, but beware the darkness that lingers in the spaces between." Elara listened, the cryptic words threading through her mind like a delicate web. She felt the full weight of her task pressing down on her chest, the responsibility not only to confront the darkness outside, but to reconcile the fracture within herself. Turning back to the tome, Elara traced her fingers over a diagram depicting a complex weave of mirror threads. Each strand represented a different facet of reality. The ancient binders had used this pattern to maintain balance, but the threads were now frayed and tangled. She understood then that her own power was part of this weave, that to restore harmony, she would need to embrace all parts of herself, even those she feared. A sudden flicker caught her eye. The mirrored walls around her pulsed, and her reflection fractured into dozens of images, each one a different version of herself. Some smiled with warmth, others sneered with malice, and a few looked back with hollow eyes filled with doubt and fear. The cavern seemed to breathe with her turmoil, the light dimming and brightening with the rhythm of her heart. Elara's breath caught as she faced the fractured pieces of her identity. The journey ahead was no longer just about battling an external enemy, but about confronting the shadows within. She swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, "I will not let the darkness win." Mira's voice echoed softly. "To accept your fractured self is to wield true power. Fear not the shadows, they are part of the whole." As the chamber began to dissolve around her, the ancient knowledge and Mira's guidance settled deep within Elara's soul. She stepped forward, ready to face the fractured realities with a new sense of purpose. The balance was fragile, but within her lay the strength to mend what had been broken. Yet even as hope kindled within her, a lingering question remained. How much of herself would she have to surrender, and what price would that acceptance demand? The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Elara felt a glimmer of clarity amidst the shifting reflections, a beacon to guide her through the shadows and toward the light.
Chapter 5: Fractured Bonds. The chill of the morning seeped into Elara's bones as she stepped hesitantly onto the cobbled path winding through the village. The air was thick with unease, the kind that silenced even the usual morning bustle. Her sharp eyes scanned the familiar faces, now guarded and wary as she moved past clusters of villagers who whispered behind cupped hands and cast furtive glances her way. A child clutched her mother's skirts, peering at Elara with wide eyes, the innocence of curiosity tangled with a shadow of fear. Somewhere a door shut abruptly, the sound echoing like a warning. The village, once a place of safety and warmth, now felt like a fragile glass orb, trembling under the weight of suspicion. Elara's heart tightened, memories of laughter and shared stories clashing with the cold present. She stopped near the well, where the water's surface reflected a fractured sky streaked with clouds. Her own reflection wavered, distorted by ripples, a reminder of the fractured realities she was bound to face. "Your powers, they're dangerous," a voice muttered behind her. She turned to see an elder woman, her face lined with age and worry. "We don't know what you might bring upon us." Elara forced a steady breath. "I seek only to protect this village, to keep the balance." The woman's eyes flickered with a mix of doubt and sorrow. "Protection comes at a price, child. We fear that price." Battling the sting of rejection, Elara nodded and moved on, the weight of isolation pressing heavier with each step. But even amidst the cold shoulders and whispered doubts, she found one familiar face, Jorin. His broad frame was bent over a workbench inside his cluttered workshop, the scent of wood shavings and metal filings filling the cramped space. He looked up as she entered, his steady gaze softening. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said quietly, setting down a delicate pendant crafted from a mirror shard. She watched him work with a mix of admiration and gratitude. Jorin's steady presence grounded her, a tether to the world she feared losing. But even his steady presence couldn't fully shield her from the gnawing loneliness. Later that day, Elara found herself in the quiet sanctuary of Tess's healing hut. The warm, earth-toned robes and the faint scent of herbs offered a brief respite from the village's suspicion. Tess's gentle hands moved with practiced care over a minor scrape Elara had sustained during her latest foray into the mirror realms. "There's more than wounds on your skin," Tess murmured, her warm eyes meeting Elara's. "Remember, even the strongest need healing." Elara's fingers twitched with the urge to hide her vulnerability, but here, beneath the soft glow of candlelight, she allowed herself a moment of tenderness. The healer's presence was a balm to her frayed spirit,
a reminder that despite the fractures in her world, she was not entirely alone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery hues, Elara stood at the edge of the forest that bordered the village. The fading light cast long shadows, and the distant sounds of the village carried a bittersweet melody, home and exile entwined. Her reflection, caught in a pool of water, mirrored not just her image, but the fractured self she struggled to reconcile. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but her resolve hardened. She would face the darkness within and without, even if it meant walking it alone. Taking a deep breath, Elara stepped forward into the twilight, the shards of her fractured bonds scattering behind her like scattered light. The journey was far from over, and the mirror realms awaited with all their secrets and shadows. Her story was just beginning.
Chapter 6: Reflections of Fear. The air in the chamber was colder than anything Elara had encountered in the fractured realms so far, a biting chill that seemed to gnaw at her very bones. Shifting shards of broken mirrors hovered in midair, suspended like frozen raindrops, their jagged edges catching and fracturing the dim light in twisted patterns. Elara's breath came out in visible puffs as she stepped cautiously forward, every sense alert to the slightest movement or sound. The metallic whisper that filled the space was both alien and familiar, a dissonant chorus of reflections, the echoes of countless fractured realities layered one atop another. Her heart pounded, each beat a sharp drum signaling both fear and determination. The Mirror Queen's influence was palpable here, a dark presence woven into the very fabric of this place. Elara tightened her grip on the small polished shard she carried, a focus for her mirror-binding magic, and began to weave the protective symbols she had learned in secret. The air seemed to hum in response, the faint glow of her magic casting wavering shadows across the broken glass. Suddenly, from the swirling shards, forms began to coalesce, shapes blurred and solidified, their surfaces gleaming with the sheen of corrupted glass. The creatures were grotesque reflections of the natural world, twisted beasts with limbs that bent and shimmered impossibly, faces that flickered between snarls and mocking grins. Their movements were fluid yet jagged, as if the very essence of the mirror realm had been warped into living nightmares. Elara's breath caught. The creatures surged forward, sharp edges slicing through the air with a sound like breaking crystal. Her instinct was to retreat, but the memory of her village, the people depending on her, steeled her resolve. She raised her hands, tracing complex sigils with practiced precision. The magic responded eagerly, a silver light radiating from her fingertips and weaving around the attackers. As the creatures lunged, their mirrored surfaces reflected Elara's own face back at her, distorted, fearful, uncertain. The sight stabbed at her confidence, dredging up the doubts she had tried so hard to suppress. Could she truly stand against such darkness? Was her power enough? The questions threatened to overwhelm her, but a deep breath grounded her in the moment. With renewed focus, Elara intensified her spell work. The silver light coalesced into sharp shards of pure energy, cutting through the corrupted creatures. Their forms cracked and splintered, the edges of their bodies fracturing like fragile glass. A chorus of shattering echoed through the chamber as one by one they dissolved into harmless fragments, drifting down like snow. Panting, Elara lowered her hands, the glow fading from the air. The silence was thick,
broken only by the soft clatter of settling shards. She took a moment to steady herself, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into her muscles. Yet beneath it all, a flicker of hope remained, a fragile ember amid the shadows. She knew this victory was only a small step. The Mirror Queen's reach was vast, and the darkness within Elara herself still threatened to consume her. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of strength, a quiet certainty that she could confront whatever lay ahead. As she turned to leave the chamber, the fractured reflections around her seemed less hostile, more like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be put together. The path forward was dangerous and uncertain, but Elara's journey was far from over. Somewhere beyond the shifting glass, her other self awaited, and with it, the ultimate test of her courage and compassion. The shards whispered their secrets, and Elara listened closely, ready to face the fractures within and without. The sharp scent of ozone lingered in the air as Elara moved deeper into the fractured realm, her footsteps echoing softly against the crystal floor. The broken mirrors around her reflected not just her image, but flickers of other possibilities, versions of herself that smiled, sneered, or wept. Each reflection was a reminder of the thin boundary between who she was and who she might become. Suddenly, a low growl shattered the stillness. From the shards, a cluster of corrupted mirror creatures emerged, their bodies shifting with unnatural fluidity. Elara's eyes narrowed. She knew these were not mere illusions. They were extensions of the Mirror Queen's will, sent to test her resolve. Instinctively, Elara raised her shard talisman and began to weave her mirror-binding magic. Silver threads of light spun around her fingers, forming protective sigils in the air. The creatures advanced, their distorted reflections mocking her hesitation. "You cannot hide behind your light forever," one hissed, its voice a distorted echo of Elara's own. Fear prickled at the edges of her mind, whispering that she was not strong enough, that the darkness would claim her. But the thought of her village, of Joran's steady support, grounded her. With a steadying breath, she launched a burst of energy that shattered the nearest creature into glittering shards. The battle was chaotic. Each strike met with a counter, reflections fracturing and reforming with maddening speed. Her magic strained under the assault, her confidence wavering as the creature seemed to anticipate her moves. But she adapted, weaving more complex patterns, drawing strength from the empathy she held for the fractured realities around her. Finally, with a surge of power, the corrupted creatures cracked and dissolved into harmless fragments. The silence fell once more, leaving Elara alone with her pounding heart and the lingering echoes of the Mirror Queen's shadow. She knew this was only the beginning. The true battle lay ahead, in the labyrinth of mirrors where her other self awaited. But for now, she had survived the reflection of fear itself. "You did well," a voice whispered behind her. Elara spun around to see Mira's shimmering form materialize from the fractured reflections. "But this is only the first trial," Mira continued, her ever-shifting visage both comforting and enigmatic. "The darkness you fight is part of you. Only by accepting it can you hope to find balance." Elara nodded slowly, the weight of the journey settling heavily on her shoulders. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "afraid I'll lose myself." Mira's eyes, like liquid silver, met hers with quiet understanding. "Fear is a reflection, not the truth. Look deeper."
As Mira's form dissolved back into the mirrors, Elara felt a renewed determination. The path was perilous, but she would walk it. For herself, for her village, for the fractured realities that depended on her. The shards around her shimmered softly, a silent promise that even in brokenness, there was strength. The chamber's exit loomed ahead, a gateway framed by countless mirror shards that flickered with uncertain light. Elara stepped forward, the echoes of the battle still fresh in her mind. Behind her, the shattered remains of the corrupted creatures glimmered faintly, reminders of the Mirror Queen's reach. Her reflection met her gaze, stronger now, tempered by fear and resolve alike. The journey was far from over, but with each step, Elara moved closer to embracing the fractured self that would save her world. With a final breath, she crossed the threshold, the mirror realms shifting around her as the next challenge awaited. "I won't let the darkness win," she whispered, voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. And with that, the dance of shadows and light continued, a mirror's journey unfolding in endless reflections.